Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting. I'd like to begin by welcoming members of the public or press who've joined us today, either in person or watching via the live stream to this meeting of the Environment and Green Investment Committee at New Shire Hall in Alconbury. I'd like also to welcome members and officers, although my sheet doesn't tell me I'm supposed to do that, but everybody is, of course, most welcome. The council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. May I ask, though, that everyone present turn their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is in progress. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked fire exit and assemble in the car park. The closest fire escape is through the middle doors on my left. Item 1 is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. So would the Democratic Services Officer please report any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. There are apologies from Councillor Gowing and Councillor Goldsackett here as a substitute.
Thank you very much indeed. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? None? Thank you very much. Item 2 then is the minutes of the meeting of the 18th of January. We're being asked to approve the minutes of the previous meeting held on 18th of January as a correct record. May I ask whether any member disagrees with the accuracy of the minutes? I'm not seeing anyone, so we'll take those as carried unanimously. Then we move on to the action log. Do officers have any comments or updates on the action log, please?
So it's on the action log about providing members with a briefing note on the changes to the connections, trying to speed up connections from Ofgem and government. I'll be sending out a briefing note in the next couple of weeks. It's basically a connections plan which covers 6 key points on how projects are going to be either triaged more strongly so that they don't get onto a connection list. It's going to be how you move projects faster to connect more quickly. And it's also about how you, before you even get onto a list of having a project that can connect, that there are certain criteria that you have to cover. So I'll send that over in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you very much indeed, Cheryl. Emma.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so it's action log 182, which is shown on page 113 under item 8 in the agenda plan, just say that's been done. So the breakdown of the individual recycling, reuse, composting and recovery rates is within that item now. So thank you. That can be closed off.
Thank you very much. I'm looking to members for comments and questions now. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask about action point number 98, which was about the tree and woodland strategy and arranging a workshop for committee members to input into development of the final strategy next year. And this was in October 2022. So I'm assuming the original intention was to have a workshop during 2023, but it says the workshop will be organised shortly. I just wondered if we had an update on that, please.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank you, Chair, through you. So yes, details and baseline documents are being prepared for that, and we're looking to have a workshop in due course. Until we have the correct information on that document, we won't be bringing it in front of members, but it will be being planned in, and I've been speaking to the Chair and Vice Chair about when that can be brought forward. So we'll provide more updates going. Okay.
Can we be sure it will be in sometime in 2024?
Most definitely, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Count.
Yeah, it was on the same point, really. I mean, I read it, October 2022, and it says a workshop will be organised shortly, and quite frankly, that's not really good enough. So as an action, could we actually have the timeline for what will happen? Because what we're told is it will be shortly, it will be this, well, the bookwork says it will be shortly. That's over a year and a half ago. We're now told it's in due course. So can we actually have a printed timeline so we can hold this administration to account, please?
In fairness, I think it's officers, but yes, certainly we'll get you a timeline for that.
Thank you very much. And I hope you won't insist on it being printed, because the idea of it being posted out to every member of this committee is slightly ridiculous. I assume you mean in writing.
Of course, I didn't mean printed on paper, Chair. I mean, really, it's printed. Here I am using my laptop.
So are there any other comments on the action log? If not, I will move on. Thank you very much, members, to public questions and petitions, and we have received none of either. So we will move on to item 4, which is the low carbon heating programme for council buildings. And I'm going to be asking Sarah Wilkinson, who is our carbon and energy manager, to present this to us. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you and good morning, everybody. So this report provides an update on the low carbon heating programme, which is reducing emissions from the council's own buildings, and it also seeks approval to proceed with the next phase of that programme. So far, we've replaced gas and oil boilers with heat pumps at 22 of our sites already, and there are 3 more in progress right now. These 25 projects between them are forecast to save 435 tonnes of carbon per year, and we're already seeing much of that in our carbon footprint report, showing those reductions coming through. The proposed next phase is a 2-year programme of projects at 9 council sites. The sites are listed in paragraph 3.5 of your report. These will deliver a further 178 tonnes of carbon saved per year once they're all complete. Public sector decarbonisation scheme grant funding, which is a government grant scheme of £1.24 million, has already been secured for this programme, which will cover about a quarter of the estimated total costs. The decarbonisation fund would cover the remaining costs, which is an existing fund already in the council's capital programme. Approval is therefore sought to commence with this next phase of projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah. So can I ask members for comments and questions? I'll take comments and questions together, I think, on this occasion. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you very much. So I've got one of each. Comment, I'm very glad that we're doing this and endeavouring to improve the energy efficiency of our buildings. And of course, what it highlights to us is that we have buildings all over the county, unexpected, to be expected. And so what I would quite appreciate is in this list, it's clearer where the places are. So I'd like any list to actually refer to the location more clearly. Sometimes they're just in this list, it does say, for example, Ramsey Youth Centre is obviously in Ramsey, but in some places there's a reference to a building and you don't know quite where it is. But anyway, in this, it's fine. So all good, but I notice in 3.6, there is a recognition that the proposed site list also excludes those sites where the long-term future of the council's occupation was uncertain. And my question is around, are we doing a careful analysis of properties that we might be considering disposing of before investing in energy upgrades? You'll remember that we have, in one case, I believe, invested in a school which then had to be closed. So, and that was unfortunate. It was just an unfortunate combination of timing, but it was just, it was this, are we doing a careful analysis of properties that we might want to hang on to and therefore invest in? But also, I'm just mindful that there might be buildings where we're not sure about whether we want to keep them, and therefore they may be in a sort of limbo as to whether improvements might be done or not. And I just wondered, what do we have any properties that are in that position? Sorry, I don't want you to identify them, but do we have a number of properties where we're not sure whether we're going to keep them, and therefore we're not investing in them when they might benefit from it, if you see what I mean. But, you know, it's that careful balance, isn't it, between.
Thank you, Councillor Bradnam. Sarah?
Thank you. Yes, there's two things in response to that question. One is the investment criteria for the decarbonisation fund, which was agreed last year and referred to in the paper. So part of that investment criteria is that only buildings where there are no confirmed plans for disposal in the next 5 years are eligible for this investment under this fund. And the second thing is that the property team, who are obviously the closest to what's happening with our buildings in general, are the people who have indeed approved the final list of where we want to invest. So they're the people who will know best as to what the plans are for any particular building. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Sarah. We can be assured that there is close working between you and your team and the assets and property people. Councillor Milnes was next.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Thank you for the report and recommendations. It's perhaps somewhat unusual to have such a positive start to a meeting, so it's very welcome. I'm just really pleased to see this continuation, because we are still in an early adopter phase of our green technology. But we've already made substantial progress. I remember in relation to one of the projects, and we were talking about thermal efficiency of old buildings and making sure that we are preparing our buildings to take air source or ground source heat pumps in Burwell House, which is a very old building, but was had reinforced insulation before we went ahead with the project. So I just welcome the report. I'm very pleased to see that we've been successful in our grant application to the government, because that's made a major contribution to the total budget. Just one simple question I wondered about. We have mechanical ventilation and heat recovery systems as part of the programme. And I'm just wondering whether we have any site of reversible, because this is normally taking the heat out before it gets sent outside. But in 40-degree centigrade temperatures, actually the reverse would be very useful. And there are MVHR, reversible MVHRs available. And I wonder whether they were on our radar. Thank you.
I'm afraid I might have to refer to my colleagues in the property team to answer that one. I'm afraid, sorry.
Fine, thank you.
It is an interesting question, and I think members of the committee would be interested in the answer to that. So if you could find that out and circulate it, that would be very good. So Councillor Hathorn was next.
So this is a really great project. So the county council is committed to the whole county becoming decarbonised, and that's got to mean the buildings beyond the scope of the county council. And in particular, there's parish councils and community buildings, which I think really struggle to do this. A lot of the projects the county council does are specifically sort of demonstration projects. And I just wonder, particularly looking at the county council website, whether we're maximising the demonstration element of the retrofitting we're doing to the decarbonisation, the retrofitting we're doing to these buildings. I think, you know, parish councils don't have the same officer. It's not just parish councils, but if I take them as an example, they don't have the same officer capacity that other tier authorities have. So it is difficult for them to kind of envisage and find the space to work out what a retrofit of their buildings would look like. And I recently went to a retrofit organisation launch, and there were sort of two views. One was you either have a major retrofit, or the other is you work through it by steps, which are always moving in the right direction. So maybe you start with LED lights, and then if you're going to need for an air source heat pump different radiators, maybe you could do that progressively rather than having one big bill. And I wonder if we could do more to talk to parish councils and not just document what's happening in our buildings, but sort of really get it under the noses of them so they can really see how this could be achievable in a step-by-step way, which corresponds to the budgeting process within parish councils, and also so they reach the point where they're ready to go when the boiler fails, because when the boiler fails and all the residents are going, it's cold, the easiest thing to do in the world is just to get another gas boiler. But if you're ready to go, then you will be in that position to just be able to take that step and go for decarbonised technology.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hathorn. I'm going to ask Cheryl to come in and talk a little bit about the community side of what we're doing on energy. So Cheryl, could you?
Thank you, Councillor Hathorn. The idea of doing more promotion around the buildings we've retrofitted as exemplars is a good idea, but it's also just to let you know that we're coming forward with a paper on retrofits, building retrofits, which is non-domestic as well as domestic, because obviously we have a lot of non-domestic, the community buildings are non-domestic. So we're bringing forward a paper to April committee, but we're also working on solutions on how you go into communities to look at a place-based approach. So where there is government funding, pump priming, public sector decarbonisation scheme. So for public buildings, there's a new scheme which is around local authority housing retrofits, which has come out, I think it was the end of last year, for local authorities to apply for social housing. It's saying, how do we go into an area, identify all the buildings that need to be pulled together, and then start building up the business case on what can you do for the public buildings, what can you do for the social housing, and how do you then make it easier and more cost effective for those other buildings, which, let's say, private sector and the community buildings. Now, that's not going to be a quick fix. It's going to take time, but that's the intention of how do we do that and how do we pull that together.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Count.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got some questions based on how the actual costs line up against the strategy. So the first one I've got is about the 20-year payback period. So you've got a strategy that says that these projects should pay back, taking the carbon amount into account within a 20-year timeline. That's for the total portfolio. Now, some of the actual measures taken, such as insulation, I would expect to last 20 or even more than 20 years. But other installations, I've no idea of the lifetime cost of a heat pump, for example, because if I put a boiler in my house now, I get a 2-year, 5-year, 10-year warranty, depending on what I pay for. So how long do heat pumps last? LED lighting, is that the fitting that's the major cost, or is that going to last for 20 years? So is the actual is the cost of failure for certain points incorporated in the actual projected cost, so it's matched up that way. The second part is not encompassed here in reference to a strategy, so I'm not sure if it's the strategy or not, but do we have an actual carbon cost per unit? We've used this in other papers. So, for example, we were talking about whether you buy carbon credits, they would cost so much to have somewhere else. So have we got something in our strategy, and therefore is this matched against this? Because in the table at 3.5, where it's got the total project cost, grant value, decarbonisation fund contribution, etc., it would be really useful to have what is the cost per carbon unit. Now, it's not possible to simply divide one by the other because it's a more complicated sum than that. But it'd be really useful to have that, and then we could tabulate that against the strategy. Does the strategy have a figure? And if it does, why isn't that matched up in here? And if not, should the strategy have a figure? Thank you.
Are you taking this, Sarah? No.
Yes, so I think on the first point, Councillor Count, there's no reason to think heat pumps should last around 20 years. That's why that sort of figure was chosen initially. So all of those measures should last well within the lifetime of that payback period. In terms of the value of carbon, so we do consider that in the business cases already. So there's the value of carbon, either carbon emissions or in this case carbon savings. Those values are published by the UK government, so they're available on the website, and we use those standard carbon values in our business cases. So that's already taken into account. if you're looking at individual projects, you can divide the cost by the carbon savings if you wanted to look at cost per tonne of carbon saved. But we tend to look at the whole portfolio overall.
Just going to add to that. So the discussion around the pounds per tonne of carbon emission saved is actually quite complex. So we were just yesterday, day before, having a conversation around where is the best price for CO2 reduction. So as an example, because we have all the technologies that can deliver carbon emission reductions in buildings, that's at the moment a cheaper price than if you were trying to save the carbon emissions on another aspect, potentially transport or waste, or if you're looking at rural estates. So every tonne of carbon that's being saved isn't quite equal in terms of its pounds when you do it, but it's a metric which I agree is something that we should start bringing in more readily into some of our papers so that you understand what that price is when we're putting those measures into buildings.
Thank you. Councillor Corney.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's kind of already sort of been answered already, but the point I'd make, and I'm picking on Ramsey because it's a building that I'm aware of, and believe it or not, I was once actually a youth that used it. Just look at the cost of it, what we're spending there. It's always been a problematic building. It's stood empty for some time. And Sarah's given us some reassurance that the team obviously have got an end use for it, but just look at the cost of it and compared to an awkward building that's struggled to find a use, and compare that to replacing it with something with more efficient in the first place. It's a complex equation then, because then obviously you've got the carbon of taking it down and rebuilding it, but then looking at the cost, it's the same, bang for buck almost, sort of the questions there, I guess.
To sort of a whole life cycle cost of whether it's better to sort of improve what you've got than knock it down. The detail of the actual building, I can't give you any detail on that. You obviously know more, but I do know that the discussion of this list of buildings was done in partnership with our property colleagues. And so clearly this is a building that is going to be kept and is going to be developed. So, but happy to take your point away and have a discussion about it.
Thank you very much. That sounds like a useful conversation to have. I'm not seeing any. Oh, I am seeing a hand. Councillor Ray.
Simple question about the previous projects on page 23. I'm intrigued at the March Library figure for 137% grant funded, and several at 100, close to 100%. Can you explain how that arises?
Yes, I can. And that is because there was a group of 7 sites where we got a total amount of grant for those 7 sites, and it wasn't specified anywhere how much of that grant was for each of one of those 7. And I've done some maths according to the grant criteria, and that's how it turns out, which obviously doesn't look right, but that's what the total numbers. No, well, it will be offset by some of the other buildings. So that group of 7 from Cambridge Central Library to Wisbeach Library in the list is that group of 7 where we got the grant for that bunch together.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. And looking at that list and going back to Burwell House, it's a building I am familiar with and I have been to on a number of occasions, both out of general interest, but also musical interest. And I absolutely endorse what we have spent here, because it was a brilliant building used by a wide range of organisations, but in particular, it supports music workshops, art, learning about the environment. It's a great building, and it's residential as well, so it means that people can come and stay. And it's just so much better now than it was before. So, and it's going to be so much more sustainable in the future. So I'm very glad that we've spent the money on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think this is, I hope we can all agree, an excellent programme and doing some really good things. And I think we're already seeing the benefits of that. We got our carbon footprint report at the last meeting, and it's good to see that going in very much the right direction as these programmes work their way through. So thank you enormously to officers for all their hard work on doing this, and it's really paying off. So in the absence of any further comments or questions, the recommendations are to agree to proceed with the project as set out in section 3.5 of the report, and to delegate authority to the Executive Director of Finance and Resources in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Environment and Green Investment Committee to enter into grant agreements and to award and execute the required contracts for the provision of design, consultancy services and construction services for the delivery of the programme. Can I see those in favour of that, please? Thank you. Can I see those against, please? That's one. And I don't think that leaves any abstentions. So that is carried by a very substantial majority. Thank you very much indeed, members. On then to item 5. Oh, thank you, Sarah, as well, I should have said. Excellent work as always. Item 5 then is the Council's flood risk enforcement policy, and it will be presented by the flood risk manager, Hilary Tandy, who is already at her microphone. So welcome, Hilary.
Hello. Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm just checking the microphone's on. I'd also just like to introduce my colleague, Catherine Reddin, as well, who I think some of you may have come across on various emails about flood risk issues. So Catherine will be jointly helping me with this. So we're here to present an updated policy and protocol for enforcement action under the Land Drainage Act 1991. So in 2012, the responsibility for enforcement powers under sections 23, 24 and 25 of the Land Drainage Act were transferred to the lead local flood authority, which is Cambridgeshire County Council, and those powers transferred from the Environment Agency. So following that, in 2013, we adopted and published our first flood risk enforcement policy. So with the 2013 policy clarified our approach to flood risk management. It defined the criteria for intervention, explained our principles for regulation, and it also explained the enforcement process that we would follow. So given that the policy is now 10 years old, we've refreshed and updated it to bring it here today, and it's in line with the team's experience of the water environment across Cambridgeshire over the last 12 years. As with the existing policy, the desired outcome is still to ensure compliance through discussions and negotiations, but where it isn't possible, we recognise that we would need to take more formal action. And as outlined in the document, this may include things like serving notices, prosecution or carrying out work ourselves, which would be ultimately recharged back to the landowner. And as you'll see from the paper, there are 3 key elements to the updated policy. The first is our criteria for intervention, and this outlines definition of enforcement and then an initial assessment process for when we receive a report. It's been important to include a definition of enforcement, as there's often an assumption that it would mean going straight through a legal process, but experience has found that many contraventions can be resolved through informal action. So we've set down what we mean by informal and formal action. And in the updated policy, we've also included a caveat just that there may be occasions where we're unable to review every allegation in detail, such as a major flooding event in 2020, where we received upwards of 400 or 500 reports at the same time. And in these cases, a higher level assessment may be required to determine the most serious of cases. The second element is the principles of regulation and enforcement, and this section will explain how the council must take account of the regulator's compliance code. This is similar to the previous policy. However, this time we've included templates of some of the formal letters that we send out, and that's to aid transparency and consistency. And as outlined in the paper as well, we haven't included templates of those more informal letters because these are all different and tailored to each case. The third element is the flood risk enforcement process itself, which sets out a flow chart to be followed by officers in determining the level and type of enforcement action required. This provides more detail than the existing policy and distinguishes between high and low impacts on water quality, flow and flood risk. So you'll see from the paper that there are more general updates as well in terms of the template used, the accessibility requirements, and also the addition of a glossary of terms to help aid the reader. The updated policy and enforcement process has been through a full legal review by Pathfinder, and it also takes into account the recently adopted policies from neighbouring authorities. So in conclusion, we're asking the committee to adopt the updated policy, and we'd both be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Hilary and Catherine. So questions and comments, again, I think I'll take together. That didn't work too badly in the last item. So Councillor Bradnam and then Councillor Ferguson.
Chair, I have a series of questions. Would you like me to take them one by one? I've got...
How many is a series?
3.
I think we can cope with 3 at a time. I think if it had been 23, I would have struggled, but 3 is
Right.
fine.
Okay, so in no particular order. Firstly, I think that my most cogent concern, it lies around, have we engaged with the district councils who have responsibility for some of the award drains, and they have, depending on the area, they have quite a lot, you know, they have been doing a lot of work during the recent incidents of flooding. So to what degree have we engaged with them in it, and are they aware of this? So that's the first one. The second one is, do we have the resource to do this? Because if we undertook to do works, you know, at the end of the process, when we've gone through all the informal and then the process and people were intransigent and didn't do it, have we got the resource to do it, or would we be contracting in people to do it? For example, if there's a report we'd need to visit, we'd need to check, you know, we'd need to draw up a report of what we thought needed to be done. There'd be monitoring of whether they've done it, and hopefully a system of fines if they didn't, and all the enforcement and the recharging that you've described. So that's, have we got the resource? And the third question, which relates to page 39, give me if I can just find it. Yeah, yes, at 2.3, you say our target and desired outcomes are in line with Cambridgeshire County Council's core objectives and values. Our general approach is to educate landowners, residents, developers, farmers and businesses to enable compliance. My question is that, you know, what steps have we taken to engage with, for example, landowners who are developers, to remind them that as landowners, they have responsibilities as riparian owners, and to ensure that they appropriately delegate riparian responsibilities when dealing with the land parcels and the sale of plots. And then the second part of that is, are we engaging with solicitors and those conveyancing solicitors that the county council will be taking enforcement action if riparian responsibilities are not followed? So, because I say this because the number of times I have encountered people in new developments who said, oh, I asked who was responsible for the ditch and I was told it was nothing to do with me. This is a particular, you know, this has happened in Waterbeach, where we've had a lot of development under the 5-year housing supply appeal system, and a lot of those developers just built out. They have actually fenced off the ditch, so it gives the residents the feeling that they're not responsible for it, and yet actually it's part of their riparian responsibility. I'll leave it at that for the time being. So what are we doing to engage with the legal side to ensure that they are mindful of their responsibilities as well?
Thank you, Councillor Bradnam. Hilary.
Thank you. So just taking the first question, which was around district council engagement. So they are aware of the policy, and we have a quarterly meeting, the CP Flow, so the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Flood and Water Management Partnership, and it was presented in there a couple of meetings ago now that we were doing it, but we do engage with our district colleagues regularly anyway. Catherine spends a lot of time chatting with particularly the drainage officers and working with them on their awarded water courses. In terms of the second question, which was around capacity to actually go through the full legal process, ultimately, if we got to the end stage where it would be to require the works to be done by the county council, I think we would need to contract that work out, and it would probably use existing frameworks we've got through highways or even property and our farming team as well. So there are the contractors out there that can do the work. And then in terms of inspections and maintenance to ensure it's being maintained in the future, that would be the likes of Catherine that would be able to visit those sites and carry out those sort of spot checks on landowners to make sure the works have been done. And on the third point, I think we've talked about this in a couple of meetings about the legal process. There's a couple of updates. I think one of the things is to say that we engage with landowners or property developers at the pre-application stage if we can. So that is if they come to us and ask for the advice, then we're able to give it to them. But unfortunately, that's not a statutory process and they don't all come to us. What we do is there's a new condition that we have added on to our planning responses where it looks as though, or it's not even a condition, I should say, sorry, it's an objection point. If we have a developer that's proposing multiple new riparian owners, we need to track the success of that because that goes through to the district councils and then it's their decision as to whether they take our advice or not. So yeah, we do need to look at the success, but that does go on to our responses, which is a fairly recent thing in the last 12 months. And the conveyancing solicitor side of it, we are trying to, it's a slow process, working through the Law Society, who are the ones that inform the conveyancing solicitors. Quite recently, in the last year or so, they have updated what is a climate advice note that goes out to conveyancing solicitors. But it doesn't explicitly talk about riparian ownership, but it is definitely moving in the right direction of taking into account things like climate and environmental concerns through conveyancing. But I'm happy to take an action to chase that up and see where we're up to.
Can I come back? I would very much like us to do that because right at the outset, when property is being sold, if the purchaser is not told that they have a responsibility and it's not evident, they may not be looking at their title deeds very carefully. We need to be sure that all owners, and indeed sometimes that's management companies looking after a development once it's been built out. We need to make absolutely sure that they are taking responsibility. I now have 3 or 4 developments in Waterbeach where they are signally not doing that, and that's causing problems in the ditches that we have to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we take that as an action, Chair, for the group?
You're looking for an action specifically to do what?
The point that Hilary Tandy said they could take an action point to engage with the legal side more precisely.
That is something that's been underway. I remember we've discussed that in this meeting, easily 12 months ago. There's been a stream of work about liaising with conveyancers. Of course, whether liaising with conveyancers results in that information actually passing on in a well understood form to the eventual owner of the property is another matter. And there are things that are outside our control. But we have been for some time seeking that kind of work to be more informative and to help everybody along their way on this. Is that correct, Hilary?
Yes, I think the action I was specifically meaning was to provide you with an update in terms of where we're at with if there are any further updates from the Law Society, which I'm happy to do.
Okay, thank you. That an update I think would be helpful. Do members agree with that? Yeah. Okay. Next on my list, waiting patiently, is Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for your hard work on this. This is almost the last piece in a jigsaw puzzle. I realise how much hard work has gone into preventing flooding in our towns. In 2020, St Neots was flooded 3 different times or in 3 different ways. In August, the High Street was flooded because the previous administration had failed to clean the drains for 5 years, forcing people out there. It's not funny, Councillor Tierney. It's not nonsense. There's an FOI request. I'm not going to talk. There is an FOI request, which I'm happy to email around, which demonstrates that the drains in St Neots and in Huntingdonshire were not cleared for 5 years. So I'll make you aware of that after the meeting. At Christmas 2020, we had fluvial flooding, which overwhelmed some of the brooks in St Neots, forcing people out of their houses for 6 months. And that was perhaps the most serious incident because at that time, I think many of the riparian owners weren't aware of their responsibilities, and there was lots of debris. And so people in the middle of the town centre were flooded out completely. I think you've done an enormous amount of work in firstly tracking down who are the riparian owners, and also making sure people are aware of their responsibilities as well. And then also the day afterwards, the river flooded as well. So you've had lots of flooding, but since then we've had equal serious weather events, at least 3 occasions, and we haven't seen the same levels of flooding. So I appreciate all your hard work, and also because you've engaged and formed and worked with the flag groups, which are local community organisations who also help us understand the risks of riparian ownership and making sure those brooks are clean. My question is this is really essential, and I think enforcement has to be the last part of this puzzle, but what sort of teeth do we have to pursue these things legally? Can we prosecute these things if people are persistently? I mean, I realize it's a last resort, but if riparian owners persistently don't take their responsibility seriously and cause flooding in towns and villages in rural areas, how much actual legal power do we have to prosecute these things, and do those prosecutions ever go through?
So that is hopefully the point of the process, is it sets out that policy and the protocol for doing it. And that is what we've engaged with our legal colleagues at Pathfinder and also the other authorities as well, is to make sure that that process is legally binding effectively, so we can go through that. We haven't tried it yet, so I think experience will tell. And I don't know in terms of success rate of other authorities. I'm not aware of any having to actually get through to that final stage. And like you say, hopefully we don't need to. But this policy should aid us. I think Catherine wants to come in, if that's okay.
There are some significant limitations to the Land Drainage Act, which makes our job slightly harder. The wording of the Land Drainage Act specifically says that we can enforce against dam and weir-like obstructions in the watercourse. So anything which is not sort of a man-made structure, so for example, a tree that's grown in the watercourse, is very, very hard for us to legally enforce against, and that's a national problem across all of the LLFAs. So one of the reasons I wanted to make our policy more robust is to make sure that all of the informal work that we do up to that point is as strong as it possibly can be, and that those processes back that up because of those limitations that we have with the national policy, the National Act for enforcement.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Ferguson, did you want to? Okay, thank you very much. Next, I have Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to Hilary and Catherine for a very good report. The questions, if that's okay, Chair, is with regard to the floodplain on either side of the ditch, brook, whatever you would like to call it. Does this policy include for an owner raising the level of the land adjacent to the brook to prevent flooding of his land, his or her land? So if you can imagine, if that particular person is trying to stop flooding of their land, if he then builds on it to raise that land to keep the water in that ditch, would this policy enable you to take action against that particular landowner, or would that have to go through the EA or the IDB? So that was just the first question on that. The second question on, first of all, I just would like to thank you both very much for all your efforts within my county division, which has seen a tremendous amount of flooding over the last 7 years, which I've been county councillor. And your efforts are greatly appreciated by me, and certainly all the flood groups within my division. And I would just like to thank you at this point on that. The second question that I've got is, where we've got a brook that is under the EA, i.e. it's a main river, take for example Ellington or Auchenbury, I'm assuming that this policy doesn't then cover those particular brooks and streams. So I think we just need clarification to members that where it's an EA brook, i.e. main river, which is the same as I've got with Ellington and Auchenbury, this particular policy wouldn't cover that. I just would like clarification. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So in respect to the first point, Catherine mentioned already about the unfortunate limitations of the legislation. And one of the things that it does specifically refer to is it has to be a blockage or a structure within the channel of the watercourse. So unfortunately, this wouldn't apply to anything on the sides of the banks. And that would then become, depending on who owned that land, it would probably become a civil matter as to whether or not something had been built that would increase flood risk elsewhere. And then again, in terms of the main rivers, the Environment Agency work under their own legislation as well. So this wouldn't apply to those main rivers, so the Grey Twos, those ones that are classified as main rivers. It's just for ordinary watercourses, which is almost everything else apart from those main rivers and apart from those in an internal drainage board area as well.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you and good morning. Thank you for the report. I agree with something Councillor Ferguson said, which is I think this is one of the last remaining pieces of in a very large jigsaw. Everybody tries to not be parochial, but I think I'm about to be parochial about a problem in my area because I'm sure I'm not the only person that's seen it, and therefore that would lead to the answer. A drive over the last few years has seen the development of a lot of neighbourhood plans, supporting local plans at district level, and therefore the drive for development has pushed inwardly lots because they are in development areas, and you know the stop of development on outside areas has been great. The issue that I've seen has resulted in severe flooding of county council adopted highway. But what happened here was a two house plot piece of land traditionally housed 3 clay pits, which used to act as mini reservoirs, stopping the land coming down onto allotments and other areas. The guy owned the land. He thought he'd got a chance of development. He's filled those clay pits in. Quite right. Nothing he's done wrong there is illegal. Okay. But the knock-on effect of where that water used to reside, it's not a riparian issue here. This is not a drain, has now gone through other people's land and resulted in a flood issue on the road itself, which has been reported, and actually the neighbours dealt with it before the flood team got to it, unfortunately. And I'm just looking through, having read the document, have read your draft document, I'm just looking at this huge gaping hole that there's nothing that we or you or anyone can do about that, but deal with the consequences and then retrofit to try and find out how we can stop it happening again. Am I right? Please tell me I'm not.
So yeah, the enforcement policy does apply only to watercourses, and that's the only legislation under which we have those powers. If something has happened as part of a development though, as an LLFA or lead local flood authority, we wouldn't see it for 2 dwellings, but the district council and the planning authority would. And under the national planning policy framework, there is a requirement that no development can increase flood risk. So therefore, there should be some powers, I would imagine, under the planning authority.
In this particular incident, he hadn't even applied for planning permission. He was just, he was I'll get the site ready to apply. So, he's under no legal obligation to do anything other than manage his land. And the argument is quite correctly here, he's managing his land. But that is the cause of the flooding. It's been found out that that's the cause of flooding. And I'm just looking at this, when you look at your, I think it was 3.3 in your draft, when it says like what we can do, unfortunately in this situation, it's nothing but deal with the outcome and then try and stop it happening again at taxpayers' expense, because it will be us that will have to put it right to safeguard the highway.
The only other option I could think of is whether or not the filling in of those pits would constitute engineering works, which would require planning permission in their own right. But I'm not a planner, so unfortunately I don't know the answer to that.
I think take that back to ECDC Planning Department, Councillor Goldsack. No, but Hilary is suggesting that it is possible, in her non-expert opinion, and she has caveated that entirely appropriately, that the filling in works might constitute works that might require development consent. So that, I suppose, might be an avenue. But yes, it's a difficult position, and I remember that when it happened. Councillor Corney is next.
Thank you, Chair. I had a comment on a couple of questions, but Councillor Ferguson asked one of my questions. But just a comment, really, and there may be some something to come back on this. I don't know. It may turn into a question, but we talk about Councillor Bradham quite rightly said about handing over riparian dikes and ditches on large developments. One thing that would help in this situation, I feel, that would be the fact that they're handed over in a good condition in the first place. And what very often happens is developers come in onto large sites, they divvy up the plots, they build the houses, put the fencing in, and then they can't get a machine in to clean the dike out. Which is so it's left, it's handed over to people that don't really understand the ownership of it, and their how they manage it themselves. They don't even believe it's their own. But the fact that it's been handed over in a poor condition in the first place, I mean, to me, a simple solution on that would be a condition at a planning level. But I'm not sure that's within our gift. Certainly not within our gift. It'd be district anyway. But a condition that all sort of perimeter and drainage ditches are cleared out prior to starting would make common sense. But that's my question though, that I had as well was how do we stand as county council? Some time ago now, colleague Councillor Goldsack put forward the motion at full council regarding culverts and them being cleaned out and checked to the fact that they're capable of taking the water that's due to go down them. That sort of gets battered along, and that's been some time now over that. But I can think of one particular place in my neighbouring division that was flooded in 2020 because of this culvert not being able to take the volume. Now, that's runs down the length of a county road. Now, what happens in this situation then, if that's found that that's not been cleaned and not being done correctly, do we fall foul of our own policy?
So if we're made aware of a blockage or block culvert, this is where Catherine and the team would get involved with actually, well, ascertaining who owns that. So if it is a county asset or whether it's a private asset, and then writing to that landowner and following this process to get that cleared out. And we do that on county assets as well. So with highways colleagues or any colleagues that own assets in the county that require it. So we do engage with them and ask them to, and they require them to unblock it.
And Councillor Corney raised the question of whether it was possible or sensible to consider whether you could request a condition about clearing out of watercourses and ditches before occupation, I think was where you were going after the threat. Is there the potential for a condition of that kind of nature?
Yeah, we could certainly take that way. I think we did use one once in an East Cambridgeshire development site. I can't remember exactly where. And that had a whole network of ditches going across the site. So, and I think we did ask for that to be cleared, and I think they did do it. And it was not enforced, but it was the district council tracked it to make sure the works were undertaken. So yeah, we can certainly look at that. Thank you.
I think we're moving away. I mean, this is always an issue that fascinates members, and I think we're moving slightly away from some of the enforcement focus of the actual document in hand. But if we could consider restricting ourselves to that for the moment. Councillor Count was next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As you say, this is actually policy and protocol for enforcement rather than for risk prevention. But it would have been useful to have the paper narrative talk about our role in prevention and how that links in. So when we talk about the last piece of the jigsaw, there's no jigsaw in front of us. There's only one piece, so we can't see how it interlocks. Because when we pick up the actual measures to be taken, they pick up at the point specifically at when we become aware. And so when county council becomes aware, we then do these certain things. And there's nothing about how we become aware or what we proactively do to become aware. That's just one of the sort of internal controls that I feel are missing from the document. It's really light on what county council is obliged to do, should do, will do, and the timescales that does it. It talks at length about what we will do to other people. So when it says when we become aware, there's nothing in here that I can find, and perhaps you can correct me because I can't read every sentence, but it doesn't seem to say we will respond to the person within the timeline. We will hand it over time. If we say they've got 28 days to clear it, it doesn't say that we will send somebody back out to check it, etc., etc. It's very light on internal controls and our obligations. I think it's weak in that area. I think it's weak in the area where it links to preventative work. How do we, it's got risk-based approach, but part of the risk that is missing is how we tie it into a preventative approach so that we don't actually have these things to deal with. So this has come up through the meeting when people are talking about planning. How do we deal with planning so that we don't have to enforce at a later stage? So I think it's got a fundamental problem there in terms of its weakness. In terms of the comments made earlier on about St. Neots, I'd welcome seeing an email from Councillor Ferguson that says that the drains in St. Neots and Huntingdonshire were not cleared for 5 years. I accept some drains were discovered, but to claim that all of the drains in St. Neots and Huntingdonshire were not cleared for 5 years is simply spurious. I'd like to also go on to the point, the fact that when we became, as the current administration, aware of those drains that were not being, we investigated why, and we had no mapping system for the drains of what was cleared at the time. So we actually proposed a budget to actually map and monitor this drainage system, at which the Labour, Liberal and Independents voted against that budget. And now here we are 3 years on, that budget is being used to buy that system and clear those drains. And it's the budget that was voted against. So I really reject the comments that are being made in that way when we made every effort to secure the progress that we have. I think that we have come a long way with the extra money that the Conservatives allocated from 2021.
Councillor Count, can I ask you please to stick to the point on enforcement? Stop grinning at me. You know what you're doing. Please, will you restrict yourself to a discussion about enforcement and the papers in front of us? Thank
Sorry,
you.
apologies, Chair, but of course
Your apology accepted. Let's
you didn't
move on.
restrict Councillor Ferguson when he was on the same subject, did you?
Councillor Count, I will ask you to be quiet unless you keep to the subject.
Certainly, Chair. So going back to where I was on the actual enforcement, I think that the policy starts almost at the wrong point of where exactly the legislation does, because we can't see where the jigsaw fits. And I think it's weak in terms of internal controls. I think that's something that you've heard. So I'm not going to vote against it today, but I think you've heard it. And I think it's one for Frank and the team to just look at and say, actually, would it have been better if we'd have done those sort of things? So I can support it because I don't want to delay it. But I do think that it could have been assisted with those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Count. Picking something useful out of that, I do think that there is the potential when we revisit this, and I think, like all documents, it is under review, to start with where this document sits in the context of the suite of other documents that we have regarding water policies and flood and water management. And I think there's an argument there for doing a brief introduction to say, look, we have our policies on these other aspects, and this is one part of that, and this is how we do it. So I think there's, I think that's something we can look at for the next iteration or when we revise it. Councillor Milnes was next.
Thank you, Chair. I'm following on a theme here. So, for example, with local planning authorities, I feel that there's still an opportunity to do more liaison with them at the time of approval. So just encourage as much of that communication as possible. Looking back to October 2021, when we announced a grant scheme for riparian right owners to apply so that they could get funds to do that work. And that is further complicated, of course, by the fact that on a housing development, you may get two housing developments either side of a ditch. Riparian rights go straight down the middle of the ditch, and both sides are fenced off without access. I mean, as been said, you know, this is a problem that we're wrestling with, and it's to do with the whole of course, the whole of the water course, which is really problematic for us. And there's no free way out. And it's not just our own drains and ditches here. We've got the drainage companies, the water companies who are responsible for the drainage, taking overflow and complaining, of course, that there is so much detritus in the drains blocking the flow, whether it be nappies or fat balls or non-flushable wet wipes or other unmentionables. They really have a problem managing the amount of water. For example, we've just come out of the wettest February on record, and that was after an already wet 2023. October was another record. So it's a really complex network of systems that we've got to deal with here, and this is a welcome addition to that. But we do need to continue to look at that, and I'd be quite interested if we could have a little report, unless I've missed one, on how many of those grants or how much of that grant funding was made available to people, and what were the results of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Milnes. Councillor Bradnam, you wanted to come back very briefly, I think.
I do, thank you. The reason I asked the question about do we have the resource available is because others have made the point about culverts underneath the highway, which are of course the County Council's responsibility to clear. Now, Hilary and your officers will remember that we had a meeting in Milton in September at which Hilary and other officers attended. Residents had been reminded of their riparian responsibilities, and they undertook clearance of a ditch that runs through Milton and is quite an important ditch. The District Council helped with clearance of the arisings, and at that meeting we acknowledged that culverts under the two adopted roads needed to be cleared. That was back in September. At present, we've been told the Lead Local Flood Authority await a quote to clear the access, the frontage of the culvert, in order that they can access it to jet it. It's now March and we're still waiting for highways to jet the culverts. So meanwhile, these two roads flood at times of heavy rainfall. So can I ask when we might get that quote to get the face of the culvert opened? So that
Councillor Bradnam, I'm not sure this is an enforcement
yes, I'm being
issue.
deliberately parochial because
No, I'm not talking about being parochial. I'm saying, is this an enforcement question? And I'm not sure that it is. I mean, I'm sure if we were all to ask for progress updates on everything that we have, we would
what
never
it
get
relates
home.
to is the question that another member asked about, are we at risk of enforcing against the council for not doing work that they should be doing?
Hilary, if you'd like to answer very briefly on the generality of that question and then take up the individual issue with Councillor Bradnam outside the meeting, I think that's probably best.
Yes, this does probably relates to a series of watercourses or culverts which are generally under the ownership of the county. So we do need to, as I said, we do engage with them and use the policy in the same way. And I think for that specific location and all of the others, we just need to make sure we do, hopefully if the process is adopted, absolutely follow it to get that work done.
Very much indeed, Hilary. Mandy, Councillor Smith, you are next. Catered to speak?
Sorry, I'm still struggling to hear. I couldn't hear you. Sorry. Basically, if I can just start by thanking Hilary and her team, I think they do an excellent job. They've had a lot on their plate and they really do a good job. Thank you for that. Briefly, and a lot of the sort of, I know they hold meetings with other organisations. So I just sort of think, you know, you do a good job, but don't stop, you know. Basically, I was also, like Councillor Count and yourself, going to ask briefly, this policy, will it be coming back sort of before 10 years next time? Because and I don't mean that to sound horrible, Mr. Chairman. Basically, other organisations will be doing their policies and updating them. We need to stay current and just keep online with our policies as well as other organisations. Thank you.
Thank you. Hilary, do we have a timeline for revision of this document?
No, we don't, but I do hope to bring it back before 10 years next time, if we need to.
We are actually ahead of quite a lot of the other LLFAs. I looked hard to find ones that had been updated in the past year, and found 3 that I could reference.
Yep, we're very much keeping on top of our game, Councillor Smith. I'm not seeing any. Oh, Councillor Tierney.
Sorry, Chairman, I thought you saw me earlier. I wonder if I could ask for some guidance, please. I want to address the remarks made by Councillor Ferguson, but and I thought that the terms of debate were such that we could address anything within the scope of the meeting, which would include what other councillors said. But I noticed you didn't stop Councillor Ferguson and you did stop Councillor Count. I don't want to fall foul of your decision, so am I okay to do that, or am I not allowed to do it, please?
Let us see what you're going to say, and then we will work out whether you're within the rules or not.
Thank you. Okay, so just to address Councillor Ferguson's remarks, if I may, Chairman. First of all, I've got no problem with a councillor being a proponent of their division. I think that's great, and I commend him for it. And I also think this is a good report, and this team does good work. I think what I get a little tired of in these debates, and I know I have to get used to it really to some extent, but I get a little tired of the need to constantly widen things into a more general political domain. I think you do too, Chairman, because I think that's why you stopped Councillor Count. I did laugh when Councillor Ferguson was speaking, and the reason I laughed was because it was so transparent what was happening. And what was happening is a desperate need to try and pass the buck to a previous administration. Now, I'm sure that there are reasons why you can do that. There always are, aren't there? But I think that comes hand in hand with accepting responsibility for what is currently happening. And I don't think that councillors, every councillor does both things. So I'd like to see a bit more accepting the responsibility as well as blaming the previous administration. And then the final remark I'd like to make is Councillor Ferguson did face me directly and address me, and you didn't say to him through the chair, please, which he really was poor etiquette in the council. And I was surprised you didn't address it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Councillor Ferguson did undertake to circulate after this meeting the Freedom of Information request and answer, which I think was submitted by Councillor Wilson, relating to drainage in Huntingdonshire, which I think was now, it must have been several years ago, possibly 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. And we will all, I'm sure, look forward to receiving the information that Councillor Ferguson has undertaken to circulate. I'm not seeing anybody else wishing to speak on this. I think in some respects that's been a useful debate. There are clearly some issues still facing us, not least in establishing ownership in some cases even establishing ownership so that there's an agreed position between different parts even of this own organisation, she says with feeling. I think there are some important issues within the paper itself. I think the emphasis on education is welcome. And I think we've had a useful discussion in this meeting about the liaison with planning at the local authority, district council level. I think there was also a useful question about some feedback. Councillor Milnes asked for some feedback on the allocation of grant money to riparian owners and I think to local flood groups, and how that had worked, where that had gone, what the benefits of that were. I don't recall us having received anything of that sort, but then maybe I have forgotten. But if it's not been circulated, then I think that would be a useful note to members about what's happened to that. With that then, and with the debate we've had, can I suggest that we vote on the recommendation now, which is to adopt the policy and protocol for enforcement action under the Land Drainage Act 1991 attached at Appendix 1 of the report. Can I see those in favour, please, of that? And I think we have unanimity. Thank you very much indeed, members. That's very good to hear. And thank you very much, Hilary and Catherine, for your contributions this morning. The next item on the agenda is, and we are running 20 minutes late on my schedule now, I would like to note, is the East Park Energy Solar Farm proposal. And we're going to have Jenny Croft, who is the Specialist Projects Manager, to introduce this. It's a fairly straightforward recommendation. It is something that we have done on a number of previous occasions. It is the normal way of doing business for ensuring that we can respond in a timely manner to national strategic infrastructure projects. So, Jenny.
Thank you. Just to give you a little bit of background on the scheme. So East Park Energy is a proposed solar farm that straddles the boundaries of Bedford Borough Council, Cambridgeshire County Council and Huntingdonshire. It's proposing to connect to the national grid at the existing substation in Eaton-Soken. It is scheduled for statutory consultation in summer 2024. We have had the non-stat consultation already. The purpose of me coming today with the report is to ask for delegated authority to the Executive Director for Place and Sustainability to submit nationally significant infrastructure project related responses to the Planning Inspectorate so that we can ensure that their timelines, which are pretty immovable, can be met, and that we can provide a really substantive response to the DCO process. So that's where we are at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jenny. That's very straightforward. As I say, this is a routine request that we generally have. I'm going to start with Councillor Gardner as he has a local member interest in this. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I am the local member for Auchenbury and Kimbolton, which covers the majority, all this area that's within the particular development. My particular parish councils would like to know when they will be contacted and when they will be able to submit their thoughts with regard to the proposed application. So have you got a timeline for them so that I can let them all know when they can start to put in their thoughts, as well as of course local residents and businesses within my division? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Parish councils can get involved in the pre-application stage to help inform local knowledge and shape proposals. If they haven't been involved in discussions with the developer and the developer is very open to discussions with the parish councils, I would recommend that. The statutory consultation stage is scheduled to begin in July 2024. So we would look for them to kind of be involved in that stage, but obviously, you know, I would encourage consultation with the developer in this current pre-app stage.
Thank you very much. Yes, all my parishes have been in contact with the developer, or the developer has contacted them. We have had public meetings where residents and myself and all parish councils, as well as residents, have been along to see the proposals. They have been asked for their comments and everything like that, and where they think it could be improved or what. But you know, they are all well engaged. It was just with regard to the next stage as to when they can formally submit their thoughts. But as you say, that's July, so it's very helpful for me. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Councillor Count.
No, I don't need to comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things, Jenny, if I may. There are very obvious similarities to what is proposed here with what my local residents in the areas of East Cambridgeshire and West Suffolk have come under with the Sonica one. So a word of warning here to your communications, as you've gone down the NSIP route, it won't be when they say it is. It'll keep getting moved, and it'll get moved, and it'll get moved until it's politically correct to make the decision, in my opinion. But that's where we're at. The other issue I've got on here is just looking through this. Communication at the on the Seneca one has been I can't even say poor. It's the oldest trick in the book to fill a room probably half this size with documentation and saying all the answers are in there, which was the approach of the builder at the previous one. So I would implore you to do all that you can within the statutory powers of a local consultee to make sure that you get a much smoother, much easier communication. Because as my colleague, Councillor Gardner, will have to do, disseminating that information downwards through to parish councils and concerned residents is an incredible task. And it's not made easy typically by the developer. Certainly hasn't been in the example that we still await a further delayed decision on at Seneca. So I think last point I would ask of you, Jenny, is I assume that you've spoken to your colleagues involved in the Seneca, and I know yourself have been loosely involved in that, for lessons learned, because it does seem very, very similar.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I have been working with colleagues and there have been lessons learned, and please feel rest assured we are fully engaging with developer who have been fully engaged with us as well, and take that on board. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I think there are many of us who, when the government introduced the concept of NSIPs, rather assumed that it would be a method of frustrating democracy and genuine local input and understanding. And I think some of us are worried that we're being proved right. We have a very heavy schedule of NSIPs in front of us. We have a consents working group which spans this committee and the Highways and Transport Committee, meeting monthly to check progress on our engagement with all of these NSIPs, not just within Cambridgeshire, but outside our boundaries as well, as they impact on us. And it is a very significant piece of work indeed. I'm very pleased that we've got some resource in to support that piece of work, and also very pleased indeed at the learning and development that's happening within that team. But they have a very heavy workload ahead of them, as Jenny will be only too pleased to tell you, I'm sure. Emma, you wanted to come in, I think.
Yes, if I may. It's worth noting that David Carford would have been here today in support jointly with Jenny, but he's actually in the Anglian Water NSIPs examination process as we speak. So yes, certainly lessons learned are being taken into account. And the council has already spoken to this developer to help shape their proposed consultation process. And that's included an assessment of which parish councils they're proposing to contact. And just because a parish council may not be directly on that list, I've already spoken to Councillor Gardner and said that doesn't preclude other parishes from getting involved, as you'll be aware. So just get that point across, just to help members of the public that may be watching this today.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Bradnam and then Councillor Milnes. Was there anybody else who indicated to speak that I may have missed? Not seeing any hands, so Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I confirm that I am not expressing any view about this application. It's not in my area, and I, at this stage, wouldn't seek to make any comment about it. But in view of the experience that we as a county council have had, do we know if the developer has taken into account the need to ensure the final wire connection? Because that can cause considerable delay. I'm not saying delay is either desirable or undesirable. I'm just saying it can cause that delay.
Jenny, are you able to help, or Emma?
I can find out for you and report back. We do meet with the developer regularly, so I can pass that forward and speak to them regarding that.
If I can come in, Chair, just to say that when this is worked up, they are fully aware of the grid connections, so that would have been factored in to what they're proposing. But I'm sure Jenny can get the precise detail from the developer for you.
Thank you. And Councillor Milnes.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a similar question, and this is over the combination of solar and battery storage. We've had examples across the grid of solar power effectively being spilled and not used. So we're generating power and not using it. This is sometimes because battery storage systems are not effectively accepted to reverse flow into the grid. And I just wondered if you knew anything about that arrangement that was in this proposal, and whether it was our place to comment on it, even if it was. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Again, we are engaging with the developer regarding the battery storage. We will be commenting on everything that we need to be commenting on. But again, I can take that back to the developer and kind of discuss that with them.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Cheryl?
So Councillor Mills, you were talking about solar and battery and the combination and how those are connected. So the first thing, on such a large scheme, you'll be going through the transmission network, which is different to the distribution network. So that's the first point in terms of the connection. The issue around whether your battery is accepted in terms of how fast it can put out energy or how fast it can store energy, obviously is something that has detailed calculations around it. And the only reason it wouldn't be used would be if there is a problem on your particular connection, like it's either oversubscribed or it's over capacity. So I think there's probably some things that we can work with. I'll talk to Jenny and we'll have a conversation about what are the technical questions that we need to look at around those. Okay.
But if I may, Chair, through you, just follow up to say that Cheryl's team are all involved as part of the statutory process, and all of that will be fed into any response that's sent back to the developer.
Thank you. I just wanted to raise it because there's an emerging problem of record negative prices in the electricity market, which is this imbalance between generation and availability. And you've just mentioned the national transmission system, but we've got local DNOs who are moving to become DSOs because of the requirement for bi-directional movement of supply and demand.
I think the issue, though, isn't necessarily around the solar and battery. It's the gas price dictates the price of your electricity price at the moment. And so if there are abundance of gas, so if it's been a warmer winter, as an example, which we've been going through, there's a greater level of gas availability. So there's complexity on those energy markets.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair, for your indulgence. Much appreciated. As the local member, and there are various other local members, I would just ask that we're all kept fully up to date with the process as it goes forward, so that we're all aware and we can inform our various parishes and residents accordingly. If that can be done, I would very much appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm speaking with the team at the moment. There's going to be a formal process where the developer will come in on their proposed consultation document. I suggest that we make you aware of that when it is received, and also that we set up a briefing session. And I know the team are already talking about doing that ahead of time and then widening it out to all the members of the council as well. So I'll take that away as an action.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Count.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't know if you'd seen me. It'd be useful if you just nod when you. Thank you.
I've seen you, Councillor Count.
Thank you, Chair. The question and answer, I didn't have any questions on the actual paper, but the question and answer generated the question. So I need to check my understanding and improve it if I haven't got it right. So the question to Councillor Mull's discussion about the batteries, I believe, was because this is a transmission, this will be directly linked to transmission, there'll be no need for a battery. And it's those ones that do. So there we go. I've got it wrong, which is a good job I put up my hand in. So I'm comfortable that the team have got their head around this. Could we get some sort of briefing note so I can understand the more complex nature of what you was discussing them? Because I clearly didn't pick up in the meeting, so I'd appreciate that. But I'm comfortable with the paper and the delegations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure that can be arranged. I'm not seeing any more speakers, so thank you very much indeed for your input into that, and thank you to Jenny and other officers for their response. The recommendations are to delegate authority to the Executive Director for Place and Sustainability to submit nationally significant infrastructure project related responses to the Planning Inspectorate in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Environment and Green Investment Committee, where there is not enough time for a report to be delivered to the Environment and Green Investment Committee, and where delegated powers are used, circulate the response to local members and members of the Environment and Green Investment Committee for information. Can I see those in favour of those recommendations, please? And that again is unanimous, so thank you very much indeed, members, for that. So next on our, thank you, Jenny. Next on our agenda is the Place and Sustainability Risk Register for the Directorate. So I will ask Peter Gell, who is Service Director of Regulatory Services, to present this report to us. So when Peter is ready, if you could introduce the report, please, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd just like to give you an update on sort of corporate developments in relation to the management of risk. So the corporate leadership team has been reviewing that recently across the organisation, and really just a few things to report back to you in relation to that. First of all, so risk itself should come to committees every 6 months from the directorates, and what you will see from this directorate is the cut, if you like, of those that are relevant to this committee and those generic risks that apply across our directorate. There will be a consistent format used in the future, so I think it's also worth sort of saying at the moment that the format that you see today, as far as the register itself, will change, and it will be using a system that's it's called Grace. It's basically a software system that will capture more information than you'll see in the template and the register, which is Appendix A today. So in future, you'll get a lot more detail around the actions itself. The format as well, it will also be integrated further down the line with the performance report that comes to committees, and there will be a standard template as far as the context and information that each committee sees in relation to risk. So really, it's just to highlight that you will see some changes to that which you'll see today. Clearly, the aim is to embed risk, as I say, within the performance reports, and to ensure that directorates are approaching risk in a sort of consistent manner across the organisation. And then in relation to the report itself, Section 2 highlights the key 2 documents, if you like, organisationally that relate to risk. One is the risk management policy, and the second is the toolkits itself. I won't go right through that, but just pick out a couple of areas from it. One is the way risk is calculated, and that's using a scoring system. There are various ways this can be done, but I think the one that you'll see is one that you'll be pretty familiar with. And effectively, the scores could combine to generate a sort of a final risk score. We set a risk appetite as far as an organisation. That is really the risk at which we start to see risk become a high risk, and that is 16. That's something that can change organisation if we decide to change that. Clearly, the aim is to mitigate risk. So we start off with an initial risk, and then following the mitigations, there becomes a residual risk. And the aim, at least, is to stop that risk escalating and becoming higher. But ideally, the mitigations should see that risk decreasing. Risks themselves are managed at 3 levels across the organisation. So one at a very sort of service level. That's then for those high risks are escalated up to directorate, and then from directorate, a number of risks are managed at a corporate level and overseen by the corporate leadership team. As far as the directorate response, we review risk on a monthly basis. We have a means to escalate risk from our sort of service teams up to Directorate. We keep an eye not just on new risks that are emerging, we're looking to clearly look for any trends as far as changing or risks that are rising. And part of that is also looking for opportunities, because there are opportunities that can present themselves through that associated with risk as well. So it's not always a threat, but a missed opportunity going forward. I think the aim, when you see various reports coming through to this and other committees, is also any risks associated with that particular report or project or initiative. The aim is to highlight details within that associated with the risk. A couple of bits I just wanted to pick out from the risk register itself, which is Appendix A. So what you'll see in there, effectively there are 13 risks being managed that are relevant to this committee. 10 were high risk before mitigation. So pleased to say that following mitigation, there's only 4 that have remained high. And 7 of those risks of that 13 are actually generic risks across the organisation. So areas such as staffing, recruitment, being able to recruit the skills, maintaining and keeping the skills and the staffing in the establishment, risks in relation to capital projects that you'd appreciate run across service areas. And as we've heard today in relation to a number of the discussions, adverse weather has been an impact. So that's something you can imagine that we're managing across our various teams. Partnerships, again, as a key generic theme across groups. We rely heavily on partners for a number of our work streams. Health and safety, again, with our staffing and the environment in which a number of them operate is really important to us. And change management, as you can imagine, an organisation that's constantly having to undergo change, responding to changing environments around us, and that's something we need to manage effectively. But really to highlight there were 4 which remain high, so following mitigation they remain high. Each of these are in sort of Emma Fitch's area as sort of leads, so if there are any sort of detailed questions in relation to those particular ones, then through Chair, I'm sure Emma will be able to provide further information on those, but what I will do is just flag up which they are. So one is in relation to new requirements around Schedule 3, the Flood and Water Management Act, and that's in relation to sustainable drainage system and the approved body role. So that was 25 mitigation. That's now down to 20, but it's still high. Bear in mind our risk appetite is 16. The second one is in relation to PFI contracts, collection consistencies. So be very much aware of the move towards weekly food waste, and there's still some uncertainty in relation to that. So again, that was a 25 initially. That's now a 20. But again, we'll have to keep an eye on that, and that would evolve, and that's one where I would expect to be some changes over the months ahead. Thirdly is failure of or withdrawal by in relation to the Water Beach Waste Management Park. Again, that's slightly lower, but it's gone from 20 to 16. And that's what I wanted to highlight, is failure to arrive at an optimal or compliant solution for waste, which understands around sort of emission sort of levels, and that remains, it was 20, it remains at 20. So at the moment, the mitigation measures are just keeping that static, but those are areas that we're particularly wanting to focus to get those risks down. It doesn't mean that we won't continue to look at other areas, whether they be high end of amber risk, because we still need to get all risks as far as possible down. The environment in which we operate, as we said earlier, does just change and fluctuate, and we do need to respond to those. And that's why we review risk regularly as part of a departmental management team. Conscious as well, as far as the display you'll see in this risk register, we said earlier that it will evolve, but also there are some good examples that come to committees of how risk can be presented in a way that brings it to life from a pictorial representation. So I think in the future, you will get the information in the GRACE format, but what we will also do is talk to performance colleagues around, can we also pull out from that anything in a pictorial way that helps demonstrate any trends and information better than just looking at the grid and table itself. So sort of conscious, we've had some positive feedback in relation to how we can take some good learning from others in the future. So that's sort So a quick talk through from myself. Very happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Peter. I would say that the Green Investment and Utilities Advisory Group is probably the place that has a really outstanding approach to presenting risk and the management of risk. They have come on an awful long way, and I think that they are one of the exemplar teams within this authority in that respect. And I think there's much that many of us can learn from them. So I will take Councillor Bradnam and then Councillor Ferguson to begin with, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to just interrogate risk number 6 a little more carefully. We've been advised that there are new requirements around Schedule 3 SUDS approval body. Now, I'm not familiar with this. I just wondered, is this because because when at district councils we have planning applications, the county council comments on the ability of the planning application as presented to manage and mitigate the risk of surface water drainage, etc. So is this a new responsibility to look at that, and why does it involve, as is stated in the report, potentially up to 12 more staff? And could you just explain a bit more about it, please?
I may, through you, Chair, invite Emma Fitch to respond to that one. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're waiting a consultation that will hopefully provide more information on this from government, including new burden funding to go with it, and whether that will actually cover what's required. I think there's a scheme that's already running in Wales, and what's been found is that it's costing more than that's been provided to cover for it. But effectively, what it's going to do is to bring whole new requirements to the council as a result of the legislation that's going to be brought in. What I'd recommend is that we do a briefing note for you to go through what we anticipate that to be, but unfortunately until we have the consultation with some of that detail, we just know it's a high risk of requiring more staff and more requirements, but we don't have a lot of that detail to provide at this stage.
That would be really helpful, thank you. And I imagine this is nationwide because so many areas have suffered really severe flooding. Could I ask that, yes, great, we look forward to a briefing note. Can I ask that we might actually also have either an online or in-person briefing about it for when you've got more information?
Yes, I'm thinking that will probably be timed in with the consultation, but yes, we can definitely take that as an action.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Ferguson.
So, unfortunately, it's a bit of repetition of your point, Chair, but I chair the Utilities and Green Investment Group, in which we have been on a massive journey across the last 3 years. Sandra Bucci, who works in Cheryl French's team, has made a format which allows us to understand and live the risks, which is basically by plotting you've done all the hard work in working out the risks, the severities and likelihoods of the risks, but what she does is plots them on the matrix and also has arrows that show which direction the risks are moving on. And in that meeting, we spend far less time now trying to interpret the information and more time discussing the risks as well. So she would definitely be a good case study, and I think it would be good if we could adopt something close to her standard across the council, because I think it really is the best example of risk presentation that I've seen. I've just inherited the risk and audit portfolio at HDC and looked at lots of reports, most of them which look like this, and there's lots more that can be done if the organisation wants to live those risks rather than just look at them every few months. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that, and it's a very, very fair comment, and that's something we've identified. We need to bring those to life more, and you're absolutely right. There are some really good examples across the organisation that we're looking to embed in future. Thank you.
Yes, I agree absolutely with that. And I think that the more we can see visually presented in ways that are easy to understand and absorb, that clears space for us to be talking about the effectiveness of the mitigations, which I think is probably one of the key parts of our role here. Councillor Count, you are next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm surprised by some of the comments about living the risk instead of just visualising the risk are being made, because there seems to be a level of complacency about what's in front of us that is actually quite concerning. I mean, if you're in a red risk and there's 5, not 4, I'll tell you why there's 5. You've got one marked as amber, but I'm going to disagree with that one. You've got, even if you say that you've got 4, when you look at what that means, these should be dealt with to bring them down as a matter of urgency. And nobody on this administration has questioned what that urgency is and exactly how we're going to go about it. Now, I look at those risks. Let's take the 4 that are highlighted as red at the moment. 2 of them have a high financial impact. Now, these risks have been known about for quite a while. It's a long while since we had the report, but we know what the risks are. For example, if we take the waste management one with Thalia as being one that I'm close to because I sit on the waste management group, we've known for a long while. Well, if the financial risk is 5, we've just passed a budget where no extra resources were put into earmarked reserves in case that should happen. Instead, the money was spent on political priorities. Now, if there is an earmarked reserve for waste, but it's clearly insufficient, because if it was sufficient, you wouldn't mark the impact as high as it was, because you would say, actually, we've mitigated that. So that's residual mitigation. So there's 2 there that could have been mitigated with larger earmarked reserves. One is SUDS, and the other one is the waste management one. The one about the waste management as well identifies the need for contingency planning, but there's nothing in here saying that that contingency plan is ready and up to date. There's this team that's been stepped up and teams being briefed. But if we look at what has to be done with risk, it's a matter of urgency. These are significant numbers and significant risks. And there seems to have been a level of, as we heard, viewing the risk rather than actually identifying and saying, this isn't good enough. I'll be quite honest, 4 red risks at this stage, in my opinion, isn't good enough. And I'd like to have seen, I'd like the rest of this committee, particularly administration who are in charge, to have been hammering down to say, how are we going to get that down? Because it's scary. This is a management tool. It's scary. You've got 4 and 4. The one in amber that I want to highlight that you've got down as amber, and I believe it's red, is actually proof of pie in the pudding, and that's the actual delivery. It's number 5, the project delivery capital program. All right, red comes in at 10 million, and the actual proof of the pudding is nothing's delivered on time, everything's over budget. It has an impact on the capital program, and it also has an impact on the revenue program. From memory, that was about 11 million pounds in last year alone. So how can that not be a 5 in there? If we take that to the end line, that should be a 5 in the end line, because it's still, there's no proof that that's actually down yet, and that would make that a red one as well. So yeah, I've got serious concerns about the management of these risks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think I'm going to ask Frank Jordan to talk about this, because certainly that last point, it deserves a directorate-wide response. But I would say that looking at the red risks that are marked as red, and I agree with those, they boil down to 2 things. First, we've had a discussion about already, which is SUDS. And as has been explained, we are waiting for a consultation and some very key information before we know exactly what we are being expected to do in that area. And as soon as we have clarity from the government, we will be taking action accordingly. So that's already been explained. The other areas refer to the waste contract and which we have inherited, which I would argue is very outdated, very clunky, and really gets in the way of us doing a lot of things that A, we would like to do, and B, the government is asking us to do, and C, regulators are requiring us to do. We are grappling with the situation we have been left. We have been working extremely hard with Thalia. You will be aware, of course, that there are matters of commercial sensitivity which we cannot discuss in the public arena because those are ongoing, but we have been working extremely hard to try to find the best solution, bearing in mind the large amounts of money at stake, the large number of unknowns, to reach a position where we can have an arrangement for waste that satisfies us financially, environmentally, and in every other way that we possibly can, at the best cost to the public purse, while achieving the priorities that this administration has agreed and has set itself. So that is the situation. We have those two issues which are causing us significant grief, much of which is either inherited or outside our control, but we are working extremely hard to bring into shape, and indeed some members here are very well engaged with. But I'm going to ask Frank to talk a little bit about the capital side, because that is a directorate-wide question, I think.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Count, for the question. So I think the first thing we'd just highlight is to give some assurance around what this risk management plan does for management in terms of the action we take forward. So I think the first thing is we clearly want to be transparent about the risks and make sure we're not hiding those and presenting them to the committee. There is active management of all the key risks at senior management level. So we review risks on a monthly basis, and we've got assurance plans in place to make sure we can bring these risks down. The chair's already outlined also what we do is make sure that we highlight these for planning for committee. So the two significant risks relating to waste, the chair's already outlined that we have got clear plans to bring those forward to members with an action plan to actually address that long-standing issue that relates to the waste PFI contract, and that will come to members in due course. The other thing I would just highlight though is the issue that you've raised around project management, and I think from a directorate point of view, recognise that there is a need to provide assurance that we manage capital projects and other projects effectively. So what we have been doing is putting, first of all, lessons learned for projects that haven't perhaps gone as well as they should have done, and applying those lessons to future projects, but making sure we've got clear governance processes in place for all projects, that we've got clear gateway reviews, so projects don't necessarily go forward if we're not satisfied with that there's been enough control in there or the risks have been sufficiently mitigated. And we're particularly looking at for next financial year, very, very detailed profiling to make sure we can understand the logic behind the capital profiles. So if a scheme's in the capital programme, we've got absolute assurance that the profile that's in there is realistic based on where the project is, what status it's at, have the risks been managed. So that will help address the issue that you've highlighted, Councillor Count, to make sure that we've got realistic financial profiles against the project profiles, so that we're not putting too much resource into the budgets against capital to where we don't think they're going to be delivering, and also to give assurance that we will deliver them on time and on budget and deliver the outcomes that's required. So I think what I just really want to outline, it's anything but being complacent. So the fact that we're doing the risk process itself, the fact that we're highlighting these and then using them to inform forward plans and putting management action in place across the directorate is to demonstrate that we're actually gripping these issues and highlighting where things need to be improving. So that's just to highlight there, Councillor Count. Thank you. Happy to take any further questions there.
Briefly, Councillor Count.
Yeah, thank you for that, Frank. Yeah, I never said the officers were complacent. I said that the information we had in front of us was insufficient for us to see those plans that you've been talking about now. And I said the complacency was the fact that this committee, the administration side of the committee, hasn't picked up on this and tried to drill down with it. What's more concerning is the response I got from the chair. You seem to have failed to have grasped what I was asking for, Chair, which was the mitigations that are available to you, not the historic reasons and the political game that was, coming across. There are levers that are available to you as an administration that I've actually alluded to some of them, like financial reserves, etc., having that contingency plan, a timeline in here. So it does say at the bottom, it must be treated as a matter of urgency if it's read. Okay, so I have a request, Chair. First of all, can we get an assurance from Frank that we will get these down to a moderate level by the next report? And can I have an agreement from you, Chair, that this will come back in 3 months' time? Because if this committee doesn't see these risks come down from red, isn't in fact allowed to see these risks at the next committee, then there's no urgency from this committee. So it's the administration of the committee that I'm worried about being complacent.
You can be absolutely assured that there is no complacency from this administration, Councillor Count. You will not see this report at the next meeting of the committee because that is next month, in April. And indeed, as has been explained, the risk report comes to us every 6 months. We are working extremely hard to mitigate these risks as effectively as we possibly can. I'm not going to ask Frank to give you an assurance that these will be within amber or whatever within 3 months, because I don't believe that that is a reasonable ask given the huge complexity of what we're dealing with. But I will assure you that everything possible is being done to bring this to a satisfactory situation. And I will also finally point out that any contribution to this committee which suggests that we ought to allocate more reserves to this issue comes very strangely from a group whose budget proposal in February was predicated on spending more reserves rather than actually putting them aside. So thank you very much, Councillor Count, for your contribution. Are there any other speakers? I'm not seeing any, so I will move to the recommendation, which is to note the summary of the key risks being overseen by the Place and Sustainability Directorate that relate to this committee. Can I see those in favour of that proposal, please? Thank you. And those against? And those abstaining? And those, I didn't see a vote. Councillor Goldsack. Yes, but I was asking members to express a view on that, and we seem to have almost unanimity on that. You're happy to note. Thank you very much, in which case we are unanimous in noting that report. Thank you very much indeed, Peter, and thank you, officers. We are now just under 10 minutes short of noon, which is the time where we are invited to break, but I'm going to go for the corporate performance report on the grounds that I'm hoping we can get that done in a reasonable time. And so I'm going to ask Frank, the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability, Frank Jordan, to present the corporate performance report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the report that the committee has seen previously. So this is the report that provides the committee with the strategic performance indicators as of December 2023. So the first thing we just highlight at paragraph 3.2, there was a request to have further detail in relation to the recycling rates. So that's now provided in the detail in the appendices. So that provides the breakdown of the overall recycling, reuse, composting and recovery rates. And section 4 just provides the further update on the movement of the indicators, which we have reported through the committee throughout the year. So you'll see there's been a further improvements against the performance relating to percentage of premises with access to superfast broadband and capable broadband, gigabit capable broadband, I should say. In relation to waste, you'll see that whilst there's been an increase in the amount of waste that's being disposed by landfill, there's also been a general increase around the rate of recycling, reuse and composting. And then the final sort of main area we just highlight again relates to a previous report that the committee's received. You'll see the information in relation to energy reduction across the council estate, and the paper we had early today on the committee forms part of a future plan to continue to further reduce the energy consumption across the council estate. And you'll see again the information that we previously provided around the reduction that's been achieved to date on scopes 1 and 2 in terms of our carbon reduction, but we still highlight the issue around scope 3 being higher than our target, and therefore that's a key issue that we need to address going forward. So those are the key issues, Chair, but very similar report to what we've received as a committee previously. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Frank. Any questions or comments? Councillor Count.
Thank you, Chair. Two for me, please. The first one is on page, I think it's not moving, bear with me, go back. Page 116, this is the energy usage at CCC sites. I note that half is on street lighting, so therefore half is elsewhere. And we've had a report at the Assets and Strategy Committee that the occupancy levels at our buildings are only 25%, hence there's a reason to be coming out of some of the buildings. If our occupancy level is only 25%, I wonder if there's something that could be done here about targeting energy use at those buildings. Right, so when you look at the reduction in energy use, it nowhere near matches what the actual usage of the buildings is. So I wonder if there's scope for officers to look into whether we could work more smartly within that. The second one that I've got to talk about is the indication 24A, with percentage of premises, Cambridge and Peterborough, with access to at least superfast broadband. I wonder if technology has overtaken us and whether there's still a need for this indicator, and whether the Connecting Cambridgeshire programme should actually still be continuing in that scope, in the 1 gigabyte scope, yes. And the reason for that is because a Starlink is available, I think, in every single rural area in the UK. So I've tried to go online just to check coverage, and it seemed to say that if you was a rural farm in the middle of nowhere, you could get, you know, good coverage. I'm talking about way past super fast broadband coverage at a relative cost. Now that cost is higher than what I pay for in my private home band, but at what point do we say, well, it costs, you know, £10 million to get a single wire to a premise, but they can actually, as a business, wear a cost of £75 a month. I know when I was on the Connecting Cambridgeshire group, we always discussed that the hardest to get to premises, that hardwire may not be the ultimate solution. So there's a direct question: is that actually still a relevant thing for us to measure? And actually, are we spending money wisely in continuing to pursue that? Thank you.
Can I just come back quickly on the energy point, Councillor Counts? So I just want to check what we need to check, because obviously if you're heating a building, it doesn't really relate to the occupancy, because you're heating a building whether you've got 10 people, 100 people in that building. So if the question is are we focusing on those buildings which are going to be disposed of, or focusing on the buildings that we're going to keep for additional measures? Is that what you're looking at?
Okay, so it's not the ones that are going to be disposed of. I believe there's a live and active paper on that, and there's a programme over 2 years. So I think it'd be a bit of a waste of time there. The buildings that you're going to keep are not going to go to 100% occupancy. They're going to go a long, long way below that. When you're keeping a building, and you might be, say it was this building, I mean, you know, this is pretty thermally, but let's say as an example it was, and you have people coming in at a 50% occupancy level, but occupying every single part of the building, somebody has got to say, actually, would it make more sense if we shuffled the teams up a bit and had a heating system that could actually handle quarters, that sort of thing. Reactive lighting, where people go down corridors and they turn on and off, that sort of thing. It seems to me like there's a lot of money at stake that would have been a thought is a potential there. That's the potential. I'm no expert, you are. Have a look at it, is my suggestion.
Okay, thanks.
Chair, to respond on the Connecting Cambridgeshire indicators, so don't disagree with the council accounts, and we do need to review and revise the indicators. These indicators are the ones that relate to the current digital strategy that was agreed by the combined authority there, and then that relates to the funding that's being drawn down and then allocated to the Connecting Cambridgeshire programme. So we're required to report on those because that's relates to the funding we've secured and also the current strategy. The next strategy is now about to be drafted, that will develop on behalf of the combined authority. Clearly, as part of that, we'll look at, well, what's the next phase of connectivity that's needed to be undertaken. It'll have very different types of measures and different types of technology, as you've outlined. The wired broadband connectivity is probably got to the maximum point it can, so we need to look at other technologies. So we're required to report on these for the rest of this year because that's where we're reporting in relation to the agreement we've got, but we will review them as part of that revised digital strategy, council account.
Yeah, thank you for that, Frank.
Yeah.
As part of the, so I appreciate you've got to keep the information coming because that's part of the strategy. As a more action note, can you just look at the Connecting Cambridgeshire? If we've got a programme where we're delivering wires costing millions of pounds to remote flow, and you do a simple search and say, actually, that's no longer needed, that can be matched by a private supplier, that we could put, that we actually have the ability to stop some unwasted money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mills.
Can I just ask a further question about the connection programme? We have a sort of gain share agreement, I believe, in that, and I don't know where the information about the proportion of these schemes that we've supported, because there was a question over viability on a commercial basis, but if it was shown that then the uptake was significant, then we get a proportion of our original funding back. Perhaps Frank could give us some guidance of where that information we might be able to get that.
Chair, so thank you. Yeah, we're able to provide that information, but the key thing about the gain share funding is it will be used corporately to cover the costs of the capital that relate to the programme. So it won't be additional funding that perhaps we can reallocate. It just needs to go back to the actual overall financing of the overall programme. But happy to provide the detail around the amount of gain share and then how it's going to be used corporately. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'll get some information out on that. Not seeing any other hands on this, so the recommendation is to note and comment on performance information and act as necessary. We have commented. Councillor Goldsack, would you like us to have a vote on whether we note this, or would you prefer that we simply noted it?
I think protocol is it's been noted, isn't it? But thank you for involving me in your decisions. Thank you.
Always happy to have you involved in our decisions, Councillor Goldsack. So, right, okay, we will in that case note having commented on the performance information. So thank you very much indeed, Frank, for that. It is now noon and I am proposing to take a break of, I think, 9 minutes. So can we come back at 12:09, please, for the last couple of items? Thank you. Right, members, it is now 10 past, so I'm going to call this meeting back to order, if I may. Thank you very much. I don't know why I'm asking if I may. I'm the chair, I'm in charge. So, are we ready to resume? We have the Finance Monitoring Report, the next item being presented, and I'm hoping we have Sarah Haywood on the line. We do. Hello, Sarah, and very warm welcome to you. If you would like to present the Finance Monitoring Report, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. This is a Finance Monitoring Report as at the end of January. On the revenue side, there's a forecast overspend across place and sustainability of 1.8 million, which is an improvement of 0.8 million since last month. But there are no significant changes within the budgets which fall within the remit of this committee. On the capital side, across place and sustainability as a whole, there's slippage of 4.2 million forecast in excess of the budgeted capital programme variation. So that's the capital position. This report details a 1.8 million pressure on North Angle Solar Farm, and committee is being asked to recommend to Strategy Resources and Performance Committee that the additional budget is allocated to the project. And finally, this Finance Monitoring Report includes the savings tracker and the technical appendix, which is presented as part of the FMR every quarter. So this falls at the end of the quarter, so hence this detail is accompanying the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah. Questions and comments from members, please. I'm not seeing any. So are members happy with the recommendations in that case, which are to
Agreed.
review and comment on the report and to recommend to Strategy Resources and Performance Committee the additional capital budget of 1.8 million is allocated to the North Angle Solar Farm project funded by borrowing? Can I see those in favour of that, please? Thank you very much indeed. I think that is unanimous. Thank you. So the final item then, thank you very much, Sarah. That's very, very brief, is the Environment and Green Investment Committee agenda plan. And I'll ask the Democratic Services Officer if there are any updates, please.
Thank you, Chair. No, there's no updates for the agenda plan that I'm aware of.
Thank you very much. Members, comments, questions? Councillor Count.
I know I mentioned it earlier, but I cannot understand how a risk register that wants things to be urgent, there's 4 red on there, does not come back in front of this committee with a full explanation next month.
Very much indeed, Councillor Count, that's noted. So are members happy to note that then? Thank you. Yep, that's fine, in which case this committee is due to meet next on Thursday, the 18th of April at 10 a.m. And thank you very much indeed, members, officers, for your attendance and your input. Thank you.